Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here this morning. As always, we are in the book of Daniel, where we've been the last few weeks. Remember what last week's story was about? Had to do with some fire. It's coming back. It's coming back. Yes, there were 4 men in the fire, even though they only threw 3 men into the fire. We got to see how God protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they obeyed and did what was right, and God took care of them. Well, we're going to continue on in the book of Daniel. And King Nebuchadnezzar, so in the story with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he had told them they had to bow down to his God. And then at the end of the story, he recognizes that God is more powerful than the idols that they were worshiping. So when we actually start off in chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, Nebuchadnezzar is praising God. Verse 2 says, I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. So we can see Nebuchadnezzar's praising God. This is awesome. Well, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and it goes on to tell us in chapter 4 what that dream was about and the different aspects of that dream. Well, he wants to know what the interpretation is. He has this dream. He wakes up. This is kind of a crazy dream. What is the interpretation of that dream? So he asks his wise men, what does this mean? Can you interpret it? Well, the wise men can't. So who does Nebuchadnezzar call on but Daniel? He brings Daniel in, and this time he explains the dream to Daniel. And then Daniel is kind of looking troubled. But before we get to that far, let's read about what this dream was. Starting in verse 8. But at the last Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, and then he goes on to explain the dream. O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. And he goes on to tell him that in his dream he sees this tall, majestic tree. Goes up and up and up and up, almost like you can't see the top of this tree. It's just so ginormous. Well, this tree provides food and shade for many animals. It's just a place that's a safe haven for a lot of different animals. And so you just have this beautiful picture, beautiful tree, happiness, all things are going well. And then a voice comes from heaven and says to hew down the tree or cut down the tree, strip it of its branches, and all the animals go flying away and fluttering away. And depending what kind of animal they are, they don't all fly, go running away. And the voice says to leave the stump and let it be wet with the dew, and let the portion, let's read the verse before I mix it all together. Verse 14, he cried aloud and said, thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. So now this tree is a him, and it's getting a beast's heart instead of a man's heart, and it's eating the fruit of the field like a beast would as opposed to a man. Well, Daniel hears this dream and he's pondering over it, It takes about an hour and he's thinking, and the king goes, Daniel, basically, don't stress about what you're about to tell me. Just tell me. Like, I'm not going to hurt you because of the interpretation of this dream. Just tell me. So Daniel, after he sought God for wisdom, he tells him basically that this dream is a representation of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was doing well. He was thriving. God was blessing what he was doing. But Nebuchadnezzar's proud. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to basically pat himself on the back and basically be proud about what he's done. And God's going to have to strip him of everything. It's the idea of cutting all the branches off and everything running away. God's going to strip him of all that, and he's actually going to become like an animal, a beast in the field. Sorry, Peter, no offense. He's going to become like a beast in the field for 7 years until he's willing to humble himself and follow God. Well, Daniel gives this interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar, and as he promised, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't do anything to Daniel for giving him such bad news. But let's jump down then to verse number 29. Or actually verse 28. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. So a year later, 12 months later, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? So a year later, he walks into his palace. He's like, wow, look at what I've done. Look at what I've built. Isn't this incredible? Verse 31, while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. Boys and girls, a year after he finds out the interpretation of that dream, he's so proud, so puffed up. He claims all of it for himself. And while those words are still coming out of his mouth, the voice from heaven comes, and it comes as God said it would. It didn't come right away. It came a whole year later, but it came just like God said it would. And Nebuchadnezzar is out in the field for 7 times, like it says. The dew is falling on him. He's eating like a beast, just like God had predicted because of Nebuchadnezzar's pride. He was so proud and stuck on himself. Well, the good news is it doesn't end there, boys and girls. After the 7 years, 7 times, in verse 34, it says, And at the end of the day, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes upon heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. He goes on to praise God for who he is, and he's had a change of heart. Verse 37, Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So as Nebuchadnezzar gets to the end of his life, because chapter 5, we're going to jump to his son, Belshazzar, gets to the end of his life, and he realizes that God will abase those who are proud. God will bring down those who are proud. And God's the one who gives authority to those who have authority. Boys and girls, thankfully, the Lord doesn't turn us into physical animals. He doesn't work quite that way anymore. But, boys and girls, he still hates pride. Proverbs tells us how much he hates pride. God is patient with Nebuchadnezzar, boys and girls. He could have just killed him, but he didn't. Not that I want to be an animal, but he gave him that time of grace to learn, time of mercy, to realize, yeah, he was wrong. God was patient with Nebuchadnezzar and brought him back to him. Boys and girls, as you go out throughout this week, work on being humble and giving God the honor and glory, and think of things that you can praise God for. And think for bamboo and food, that's right, Peter, and things that you can be